Welcome to The Disruption Is Now. Join us on this enlightening journey as we explore how AI is impacting our jobs, careers, lives, and the human experience. Each episode, host Greg Matusky will converse with visionaries and innovators at the forefront of AI, diving into its challenges, opportunities, and impact. So buckle up as we venture into the heart of disruption, and together, let's unfold the future.
Well, welcome to another episode of The Disruption Is Now, the podcast where we talk about all things AI and human communications. I'm your host. I'm Greg Matusky. I'm also the CEO of Gregory FCA. We're a public relations agency with offices in Philadelphia, New York, Boston, and London. And I'm excited today about our guest because she takes a different road to AI, and it's an interesting one. Lori Mazor is the CEO of Synthetivity, and that's a company that helps corporate executives learn how to use AI with a human touch. But also, she's the author of a book, and the book is called Temperature: Creativity in the Age of AI. And I recently read the book. I got to tell you, I got really drawn into it. She's a really fine storyteller, and I don't think it was written with AI because there's way too many personal stories and anecdotes in it. Lori, do I have that right about the book itself?
Oh, well, the book itself, all those stories, yes, those were written by me, but I definitely used an AI assistant to help me along the way.
And tell me a little bit about your story, how you came to AI, because it's not the typical technology side, not even the typical, perhaps my side is even more typical. I'm a business person that wanted to see efficiencies with it. So how did you get here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was trained as an architect and I practiced architecture for many years, both as an architect and then also moving onto the client side and working on behalf of universities, helping them to hire architects and design and construct buildings. So I followed that kind of traditional career path for about 20 years. And just after the pandemic in 2022, I was just absolutely exhausted. I had been managing a 500-person operations team at a public university in New York, and I knew that I just needed a break. I had absolutely no idea what was going to be next. I kind of figured I would pick up in the same line of work, but maybe as an independent consultant. But I took that time off, and it just happened to be when generative AI hit the scene. So I started playing with image generators. And to me, this was absolute magic. And I just caught the bug and I couldn't stop.
So it started, I guess, with Midjourney, and you tell that story. It opens your book. You started with an invitation that you had written for a house party, a dinner party, yep. And that triggered something within you. Can you put your finger on that? I mean, what was it that made you look at this as something that would be transformative in your life, if not the world in general?
Yeah, I think for many people, we start our careers and those careers are very hands-on in a discipline that perhaps we picked because we enjoyed it. For me, it was architecture and design. For my father, it was engineering. But what we find is that as we age and we mature in our careers, more and more of our time is spent communicating. And so over that 20-year career, I had really mastered the skills of communication more than I had honed my design or artistic skills. So I hadn't picked up really any kind of design tool in quite a while. And when I started using image generators, I was able to take all of that knowledge and insight from communicating and now be able to combine it with my visual understanding. And boom, it was kismet.
Well, let's really focus on that because your book really surprised me, and it wasn't about AI as much as it was about creativity, at least from my perspective. And it opened my mind to new ways of thinking about creativity. You know, I was always taught left side, right side, brain, logic on one side, creativity on the other. But you kind of reshaped my thinking on that. Let's talk about that a little bit. Why did I believe that, and why is that a fallacy?
Yeah, so, I think many of us have grown up with the understanding that there are different parts of our brain that do different kinds of things, right? And Even for people who've experienced a stroke, you might lose some particular skill. Maybe it's a language skill, maybe it's a motor skill, and we can locate that in a specific part of our brain. But the idea that creativity only happens on the right side of our brain, that's a complete fallacy. And that's just the evolution of pseudoscience. It's actually based on real science and real studies that were done on human brains. But when we now look at all of the studies that are done on imaging and watching what our brains do when we perform creative acts, we find that those actually happen throughout our whole brain. There's no one locus of creativity. And so my book is about the lessons that I learned through working with machines and what we do to program machines. And I figure if we can program machines to be creative, we can also teach humans how to be creative, right? Anything that's teachable is something that we can learn. So that's really the starting point for my book.
Let me play devil's advocate because I have this thrown at me all the time. People say to me, these machines are predictive, Greg. They're not creative. They just take what has been said and they create and they guess what the most logical next tokens will be, right? I hear this 1,000 times in my life. And that if we rely on this, we'll just be recasting the past over and over again. That's not creative. Give me your thoughts on that as it relates to what you've learned about the human brain.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting the way that we've mythologized creativity as somehow being able to tap into something that's never existed before. The reality is that all creativity, including human creativity from the beginning of time, comes in a large part from our observation of nature, right? We are inspired by the things that we see, and nature's been the masterful creator. And so, scientists and artists have looked at the world around us, and what our brains do is quite fascinating. A lot of things kind of lodge themselves in our working memory, and we're conscious of them and we're able to make connections. But a lot of things also get buried in our subconscious, and we might pull those out. And when those things come out, it might feel magical. It might feel serendipitous. In fact, a lot of really important thinkers, including Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, talk about this concept of big magic, right? The idea that like this moment happens and it feels like it came from nowhere. But my thought is whether we're conscious or unconscious of the process, it is a process, and it's one that we can map out, and it's one that we can map out both for humans and for machines. So I'm not sure that the predictive language aspects of large language models are what are going to lead us to the future of machine creativity. But I'm pretty sure that we are going to get to the point where both humans and machines can invent new things.
In my world, machines are helping me create new things every day. They're helping me create new ideas for clients. They're helping me create everything from new headlines to new market opportunities to new events that I can promote for my clients as a public relations professional. I find that the biggest people who push back on that are artists, which surprise me. They are the ones who I've run into who are most adamantly against this. And I haven't really understood why, because they use technology in lots of what they do. I was, a couple of months ago, I went to Las Vegas and I saw U2 at the Sphere. And it was such a coupling of technology with artistry on many levels, visually, audio. Why do you think, is what I'm seeing an anomaly, or have you experienced anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a very interesting meme that's going around from a writer named Joanna, who said, I want AI to do my laundry and my dishes, not to do my writing and my art. And I think that's a very common feeling that people have about AI, especially for women who've worked many years to try and have access to paid work. The idea that machines are going to take over that paid work and that, we're back to doing the dishes and laundry, though I think you might need to be afraid of the robots in that case. I think this is something people are really afraid of. And I think it's important to acknowledge that fear, right? Because we need to be able to work with machines as opposed to thinking machines are our enemy or they're going to take over our job. And So one of the things I try and do is to think about how we use these tools collaboratively. And I really think about it as having a conversation with a machine. At this point, having a human in the loop is still very necessary. And so I think of it as a back and forth, really kind of thinking of AI as a thought partner rather than something that I'm delegating a task to. Now, that might come with some residuals in terms of productivity, but a lot of the time, it's really about me trying to gain a better understanding of the material that I'm working with. And in fact, researchers at MIT have found that in studying social scientists, AI actually helps them in a statistically significant way learn the material that they're studying better. It takes them the same amount of time to do the research, but the way that they're engaging with it in almost a Socratic method of being able to ask questions and refine and really direct the outputs in the way that your individual brain works makes a huge difference. So that's what I think in terms of this idea of, is AI going to take over the world, or do artists need to be afraid of it?
It's very interesting because when I started my journey in AI, right, and this goes back probably 4 years, and I say this all the time, I have not been corrected on this, so I'll say it again. I think my firm, Gregory FA, was the first public relations firm to ever use to develop its own in-house generative AI platform before ChatGPT introduced the chatbot in November 2022. We called it GladWrite as a tip of the hat to Malcolm Gladwell. And then when ChatGPT came out with 3, we already had interfaced with the machine, as you said. It was our thought partner. So making that leap wasn't very difficult for a lot of us. But we had this debate going on forever, and that is, should it be templatized like Jasper, an early AI model, which was very formulistic and templated? So, you're writing an email, and then it would put you through these prompts and it would create the email. Or should it be this thought partner where you kind of, I always say, riff, natural language processing, converse, whatever you want to call it, with the machine? And since then, we've really gone, as our firm has become more technically adept and understand the engagement. And that's what you're talking about. Understand how to speak to the machine and hear what the machine's saying. We became much more based on just riffing, right? Just put down what you want it to, where you want it to go, right? And not worry about templated. This morning, I trained a group of 6 junior associates straight out of college, none of whom had used AI, because in college, that's taboo still, which is crazy. But I showed them our original GladWrite. It was a product called writerelease.com. It's still available. It's free online. And it's very templated. If you're doing a release on a new product launch or a new hire, it takes you through all the questions. And for them, it was very enlightening because it structured it, right? But what I find is what you're talking about, once you become more conversant and once you understand this weird relationship you have with the machine, you no longer have to structure it so much. And you can get much weirder, wonderful results sometimes from things that you never considered, which to me is a part of the creative process.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think what you're talking about, people learn and engage differently. And this is a lot of what I talk about in the book, which is we all operate at a different point on the temperature spectrum, right? Some people really enjoy recipes or templates, right? And those are really helpful, particularly when we're trying to learn something new. But as you do get more experienced, and also, just different personality types might enjoy a blank page, or many people love an improvisational structure, right? That ability to riff off of something that has a little bit of a framework to it. And it gives you kind of a jumping off point. So, I think the challenge for all companies is really to find that right mix where you can personalize what you're delivering to people. And some people are going to want more structure and some people are going to want a little bit looser framework.
Go back and go a little deeper for us on temperature. That's the name of the book, Temperature, Creativity in the Age of AI. But it's the term temperature is not real well known outside of AI as to what exactly is going on there. and yours is a more general definition. But take us to AI, what temperature means, and then how that relates to our minds and the creative endeavor of our own thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. So for computer scientists or for anybody who is using the raw models, right, not necessarily ChatGPT or Google Gemini, there is a metric. Called a parameter in AI, which is called temperature. And it literally is a dial, and you can dial it up or down. If you dial it all the way up, what you're doing is you're siphoning the most random output. So that's what you would do if you wanted it to write you a poem or to come up with a new idea for a product, right? You want it to reach into the furthest reaches of the data set and get you the things that are the most obscure and the most different. But we can dial that parameter all the way down. Now, it's never going to be a binary system. So it's not going to be like a machine learning or classification system. But when you lower the temperature all the way down, it's going to give you the most popular response or the most average response, the most normal response. So that's going to be your most precise answer. Now, that's not necessarily going to be the truth, but that's going to be what the general public has voted on as being the most popular. So I'll often use the I love blank as an example of how temperature works. You know, if you say I love you, you're operating at a low temperature. That's the most popular word to come after I love. But if you say I love my mother-in-law, that's probably one of the most least popular. That's a high temperature response.
Well, I do love my mother-in-law, so I'll be on board with that. But in addition, tell us how that is reflected in the human brain.
Yeah, so
and the challenge of creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. So the human brain doesn't necessarily have this dial that you can turn up or down, but we all have the ability to operate at different points along this spectrum. And so what I have found through doing some preliminary research is that people each start the creative process from a different place. And I think up until this point, we've really biased our thinking to think that the world is divided into these two categories, right? The creatives, we'll often call them. Literally, they get this name when they're working in an ad agency. And then the analysts, right? Those people who might like numbers or spreadsheets. But what I found is that regardless of the profession, we all have the opportunity to invent new things or really make a series of decisions that lead us to an output. And so I've developed this quiz in the book that allows you to find your creative climate. And it's really a process of thinking through how you make decisions, because creativity is really a series of decisions that are made along the way. And what I found is that there are the most number of people like a framework. I call them entertainers. These are people who enjoy working in an improvisational structure. And then the fewest number of people, it's kind of like a bell curve, but a little bit skewed, like a blank page or a set of clear, repeatable instructions.
Got you. And I come in as an explorer. So tell me what that means.
I love it. So that means that you love like wandering in an open field and getting struck by something that maybe you haven't noticed before and putting together different ideas that may never have been paired together before. You probably enjoy novelty and you might be a risk taker, right? A lot of entrepreneurs find themselves in that category because we're willing to take more risks than other people. What did you think? Did that align with the way that you view yourself?
Well, it does. It does. And it's amazing because I often say that when I stumbled upon AI, I should have been the most resistant human being on the face of the earth. Here I was probably 60 years old. I had spent an inordinate amount of time trying to become more effective at storytelling and writing. And, I should have had the arrogance to say, this will never replace me. No one could replace me. I'm an artist. I'm not a machine. And yet when I saw it, it just was a blank sheet of paper. And I saw the brilliance of that single line, right, on the GUI interface of ChatGPT, that like this little line could give you access to the entire corpus of human knowledge, and it's up to you to decide what to do with it. And I thought, wow, I am an explorer. I'm going to go to the forest reaches of my thought. And what a connection between everything I had studied all my life. Right? I had been a writer. I had been fascinated by linguistics, neurology, and neuroscience had always interested me, and how the brain works and how we communicate, and the importance of storytelling over, the eons of human history, and how that formed us, and how it allowed us to create complex societies and economies. And I just had always a high regard for new technologies. I was the first person I ever knew with a personal computer back in 1984, right? And this all seemed to come together as one. And I was so excited. The first time I saw it, I was giggling. And I read somewhere about a presenter, a professor, and it said what made him great was that every time he went to class, he'd become joyous in the content. And, I had done this for so long, I'd kind of lost some of the joy. And then I saw this and I said, finally, I think I have a tool that I can help other people improve their communication. And the real intent of human communication is to improve understanding. And I realize there's risks and there's downside, and we look at those, and we have considered those more than we ever considered them with social media, for instance, already. But I looked at it and I said, this has to be for the good. Anything that can spur understanding at its heart must be for the good. It can be used for bad, but boy, there's something here. And, reading your book, I got that feeling in this idea of temperature. I have to tell you, I was listening to a podcast with Mark Andreessen probably a year and a half ago, and he told this anecdote of how a large international law firm had retained his firm to do an LLM, right? And he walked in there totally convinced that they would want a low temperature, right? They would want something that wasn't weird, that was fully compliant, that didn't make up citations. So he starts the presentation and they stopped him and they said, no, we want a high temperature because we want to see the crazy ideas that the other side might throw at us that we're ill prepared for. Or maybe it's a crazy idea that no one's ever thought of and case law doesn't allow for, that we could make the argument for. And hey, we can have our junior associates vet the citations, but what we can't do is create that open-mindedness that might lead to a better defense or might lead to a better prosecution. And that always stuck with me. And I think when I was reading your book, it just echoed it, like how it relates to AI and the human experience. So I thank you for that. And I thank you for your time today. It's been a great conversation. How do people get in touch with you if they're interested in working with you in their enterprise or corporation to accept the wonders of AI?
Absolutely. Well, you can always find me every day on LinkedIn. I write a newsletter called The Humans of AI, and I'm always there. And then you also can find me at synthetivity.net, and that's where I post all my boot camps, my corporate classes, and you can connect with me by email.
Well, thanks for being with us, and thanks for your book. It really did shape my thinking and gave me a new pathway and kind of straightened out some of my misconceptions also about the human brain and creativity. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate you having me.
This podcast is a production of Gregory FCA. If you enjoyed our discussion today and want to continue exploring the transformative power of AI, please check out more episodes and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.